Vampire Diaries aired in 2009 and became an instant hit. The series introduced a great deal of characters that have now attained iconic status. Since Vampire Diaries ended, you have probably seen the growing amount of people who wished Vampire Diaries had focused on the character Bonnie Bennett. Initially, when the show aired, Bonnie was the least favorite character, but by the time the show was ending, she had become a fan favorite. So what happened? If you've been a fan of Vampire Diaries, then you have probably fallen in love with Bonnie or at least rooted for her victory through the show's run. Bonnie Bennett was the best friend of Elena Gilbert and Caroline Forbes, and in her sophomore year, she discovered that she possessed supernatural abilities. She descended from the Bennett witch line and went on to become one of the strongest witches and characters of the entire TVD verse. In this video, we are going to take a look at Bonnie as a character by analyzing her growth, her relationships, her motives, and most importantly, her role in the story. Bonnie is a complex character that has always had different sides to her. Although she significantly changed throughout the run of the show, she always kept the same morals and values. In the earlier seasons, Bonnie had a fun and quirky attitude. She was always very optimistic, though that would change as the show went on. Bonnie always had strong character and could be counted on to say what she was thinking, whether it was in a comical situation or a tense atmosphere. This often resulted as Bonnie coming off as judgmental and unwilling to cooperate. Although Bonnie was calm most of the time, she showed on multiple occasions that she was willing to get her hands dirty, especially when angered beyond control. Time and time again, however, Bonnie proved to viewers and the characters on the show that her heart was bigger than the disdain she felt towards vampires and other mythical creatures. At times, it took a lot of convincing, but Bonnie always came around to help her friends because of the love she had for them. As the seasons went by, you could notice that she smiled less often, understandably so given all the pain she went through on the show, but she never tried to make it about herself. Bonnie was compassionate and selfless to a fault. This was her biggest weakness. Her nature in being a martyr caused her to always put others ahead of herself, even when it meant that she would die from it, and she did. Multiple times. Bonnie had a lot of growth on the show. Initially, she hated vampires and often had to be begged by Elena and co to help them. But as the show went on, Bonnie changed. She eventually became closest with vampires and even ended up in a committed relationship with one. Bonnie's character has gone through the most change throughout the show. Bonnie went from being a witch to being a ghost to being an anchor to being a witch again to being a huntress to being a powerless witch to finally getting her powers back out of a tragedy. On top of that, Bonnie was stuck in a prison world for nearly an entire year. This prompted Bonnie to start taking better care of herself and putting herself first. The thing with Bonnie is that as soon as she found out about her magical abilities and started exploring them, people from all over started harassing her to do their biddings. This resulted in Bonnie never having a moment to breathe. Every time she won a battle or solved an issue, another one was almost always around the corner. Halfway through the show, Bonnie went through being manipulated at her most vulnerable to getting tortured by a psychopath in an empty world and subsequently getting PTSD from it. After the prison world debacle, Bonnie entered the hardest stages of her life when Elena's life got linked to hers and there was nothing she could do about it but feel guilty. In season 7, when she went into hiding, this was Bonnie at her most relaxed, and finally she got the chance to fall in love again and be happy until it was taken away from her. The only positive thing that came out of it was that she finally got her powers back, won the final battle of the show, and broke Elena's sleeping curse. Bonnie had a lot of growth and character development, and even though in the last seasons it slowed down, Bonnie grew strong, gained maturity and self-love, and has since become a fan favorite.
Hey, sweetie.
Bonnie's most important relationship at the start of the show was with her Grams. Bonnie suffered from absentee parents, with her mother abandoning her at a young age and her father not being present most of the time. Her lack of maternal guidance caused her Grams to substitute as a surrogate mother and sometimes as a father as well. Bonnie had an incredible bond with her Grams that only got stronger when she discovered her supernatural abilities. It was no surprise how badly Bonnie reacted to the death of her Grams and pushed her friends away while she was grieving. This was Bonnie's first heartbreak on the show, and there would be many more to come.
She didn't show up to her dad's funeral, Damon. Nobody has spoken to her all summer.
Please. Jeremy.
You say it and everything in Elena's life goes to crap. Do you understand me?
Bonnie's friends love her. There's no doubt about that. They care about her fate and want her to be okay. Initially on the show, however, it's hard to believe that they care because Bonnie is often forgotten. Her friends were never indifferent to her pain and the things that she went through, but 80% of the time they didn't do much about it but feel sorry for her. A lot of the times it was, "Oh, poor Bonnie, I really hope she's okay," instead of, "We really need to do everything it takes to protect her." There's a fine line between the treatment Elena received from the men of the show versus Bonnie. It was never a heads or tails situation about protecting Bonnie and Elena. Elena always came first. I can't really blame Elena for being treated as a damsel in distress because her goal was never to hurt anyone, but because of that, Bonnie's well-being was often disposable.
Listen, Elena, I can't just pretend like everything is okay. Everything my Grams did was to protect us from those vampires in the tomb. And now they're out, which means she died for nothing.
She often didn't agree with what her friends were doing and wasn't afraid to say no to helping them if it didn't seem right to her. When you think about her relationships, you'll notice how much they correlated with all the issues in her life. Had the Salvatore brothers never come into town, some of the pain she went through probably wouldn't have happened. Like many witches and werewolves on the show, Bonnie's natural disdain for vampires came in the way of a lot of her relationships. But as the show went on, she was able to look beyond her prejudice against vampires. From that grew the most unlikely relationship of all, her friendship with Damon. Usually people like to think that they were enemies, but the hate was mostly one-sided, with Bonnie hating Damon and Damon being more or less inconsiderate about her fate and feelings. The relationship dynamic continued like this until season 6, when they were stuck in the prison world and had to put their past behind them. In the prison world, they came to become protective of each other and became best friends. Now, Damon did hurt Bonnie after this, when he chose to desiccate himself until Bonnie died and Elena woke up again. It broke her heart, and once again, like many other relationships she had, Bonnie seemed to be the one who loved the other person more. Bonnie was a loyal friend that would have done anything to protect her friends. She was never fake with them and always let them know when she didn't agree. She loved them all and was always able to look past their differences. In terms of romantic relationships, just like Caroline, Bonnie wasn't very lucky. Out of the 5 romantic interactions you saw on screen, it is later revealed that 3 of those love interests were actually just using her. With Jeremy, there's no doubt that they loved each other. They even overcame a cheating drama, and Bonnie quite literally gave her life to Jeremy, and he would have probably done the same for her. With Enzo, neither of them liked each other, but grew to tolerate each other after Enzo came back to life. Their relationship only really developed in season 7, when Bonnie helped Enzo deal with Lily's rejection, and he helped her hide from the armory. They were together for 3 years after that, and they were going to move in together, and Enzo was going to take the cure when Stefan arrived and killed him. Bonnie regained her powers from the pain she felt and later used her power to channel his presence.
This is some kind of warning, Bonnie. It says if you use too much of your powers at once, it'll kill you.
How much would it take to kill an original?
All of it.
Bonnie does for love. Almost everything she did on the show was to protect her friends, and that's what she's known for. Bonnie has a strong moral compass that makes her come off as judgmental and sometimes a hypocrite. She can be very mean and distant with her friends when she feels that they have been unfair or have unfairly harmed someone. This is seen when she takes her distances from Caroline when she witnessed her killing an innocent man. People often give Bonnie a lot of hate for how she reacted to this because Caroline becoming a vampire was, in fact, Bonnie's fault. The thing is that Bonnie's hate for vampires is as natural as the vampires' hate for werewolves and vice versa. The show has explained on multiple occasions that witches just don't mesh well with vampires because they were not a natural creation and that their existence was in direct conflict with life's natural flow. So Bonnie having an issue with vampires was only natural. After all, let's not forget that they feed on mortals and kill innocents all the time. They're not exactly saints. Her heroic character and natural hate for vampires always conflicted with the love she had for her friends. Luckily for her though, love always trumped the rest. Again, we saw this as an example when she eventually agreed to make a ring for Caroline or agreed to go to her wedding with Stefan, even though she had just lost her significant other because of Stefan. Bonnie also helped others just for the sake of helping others and never asked for anything in return, which is why you knew that she was honest and genuine. Bonnie's need for love often made her gullible when it came to her love interests and made her easily tricked. Bonnie gets a lot of hate for how she handled the death of her mom and her grams towards Elena, but how exactly was she supposed to act? She was upset in the moment, but actually never held it against Elena in the long run. Even with Caroline, her main reason for not wanting to make her a ring was because she saw her killing an innocent man and didn't know if she was ready or not. Bonnie isn't a saint, and she certainly doesn't know it all. Her irrationality makes her take very impulsive decisions on several occasions, but she always means well. She never ever wanted to hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. Her motives were simple: protect and care for the people that she loved and the innocents who didn't know any better.
Look at the shower curtain on Kelly Beach. She looks so hot. Can I still say tranny mess? No, that's over.
In the first few episodes, Bonnie had seemed to be serving the role of the token black friend on the show, only really doing stereotypical things like being boy crazy and keeping the peace between Caroline and Elena. Almost as soon as Bonnie discovered her heritage and started to explore her powers, the other characters started knocking down her door at every problem. Bonnie always gave her opinion to her friends, whether they liked it or not, and gave them reality checks and reminded them that they couldn't just think about themselves. This made Bonnie's character unlikable to some because they perceived her as a hypocrite of the show with a holier-than-thou attitude. Truth is, it was necessary because even though the characters didn't necessarily want to hurt anyone innocent, whenever they needed to do it to protect one another, mortals became disposable. Bonnie and Matt served as the defenders and protectors of innocent people who didn't know any better, and that made them generally annoying to the viewers. Bonnie's role in the story is quite literally the solution to every major storyline. Up until the last season, the fate of many innocents depended on her. Because of this, it became a trend on the show to sacrifice Bonnie for the cause as a last resort to defeat the enemy at stake. The center of the show was Elena, but if you flipped the perspective to Bonnie, she had all the characteristics of a hero protagonist. On the show, she demonstrated bravery, courage, determination, helpfulness, selflessness, moral integrity, strength, and most importantly, growth. Bonnie went through a veritable hero's journey by discovering her abilities in the beginning and by being the key to solving all the major issues up until the last moment. That's why to some, Bonnie was the unclaimed hero of Vampire Diaries, and her role in the story symbolized heroism at its core. Regardless of whether you liked her or not, she was a great character to have on the show and always worked for the greater good, so it was hard to root against her. A lot of people think that Bonnie deserved better on the show, and I agree. It would have been very nice to see both her and Caroline finally finding true love and being happy, but I guess we'll just have to leave that up to our imaginations. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Don't hesitate to leave your thoughts down below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.